I watched a man die in that alley. The killer turned, gun still warm, and stared right at me. I should have run. I should have screamed. But he whispered a name I hadn't heard in 20 years, my childhood nickname. Then he said 4 words that changed everything. I remember you. Before we dive into this insane story, do me a favor, hit that like button right now. This tale gets darker than you can imagine, with twists that'll make your jaw drop. Trust me, you'll want to share this ending with everyone you know. Let me take you back to where it all started. 3 months ago, I was sleeping in my Honda Civic outside a 24-hour diner in Chicago. My name is Claire, and that car was home for me and my 6-year-old daughter, Sophie. Every night, I'd recline the front seat as far as it would go while Sophie curled up in the back with her stuffed rabbit, the only toy we managed to keep when everything fell apart. You want to know how a registered nurse ends up homeless? Let me paint you a picture. My ex-husband, Derek, he wasn't just controlling. He was a nightmare wrapped in expensive cologne and fake smiles. For 3 years, I thought I was losing my mind. He'd hit me, then apologize with tears in his eyes. He'd scream at me for hours, then bring me flowers the next day. The bruises were easy to hide under my scrubs, but the missed shifts at the hospital, those added up. Eventually, I got fired. And when I finally got the courage to leave him, I discovered he'd emptied our bank accounts, every single penny. His lawyers buried me in paperwork, while I couldn't even afford a consultation. So there I was, 32 years old with $47 in crumpled bills, sleeping in a car that was probably 2 weeks away from being repossessed. Sophie would wake up and ask me when we could go home, and I'd just smile and tell her we were on an adventure. What else could I say? That Mommy destroyed our lives by marrying a monster? The night everything changed was Sophie's 7th birthday. I wanted to give her something, anything, to make her smile. I went into a grocery store and stole a small cake, vanilla with pink frosting. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The security guard spotted me, and I ran. I ran like my life depended on it, clutching that stupid cake with Sophie's hand in mine, into the warehouse district, where the streetlights barely worked. We ducked into an alley, and I held Sophie close, trying to quiet my breathing. That's when I heard the voices. 3 men in suits stepped out of a black SUV that looked like it cost more than I'd made in 5 years. One man was on his knees, begging. He was saying something about paying back money, about needing more time, about his family. The man standing over him was tall, maybe in his 40s, with salt and pepper hair slicked back and eyes that looked carved from ice. He wore a suit that probably cost thousands, and he moved with this terrifying calm. He pulled out a gun, no hesitation, no emotion, just raised it and fired once. The sound echoed off the brick walls, and I clamped my hand over Sophie's mouth to stop her from screaming, but she gasped, just a tiny sound, and it was enough. The man's head turned toward us like a predator catching a scent. Our eyes met across that dark alley, and I knew we were dead. I pulled Sophie behind me and waited for the bullet. But he didn't shoot. He walked toward us slowly, gun still in his hand, and his expression changed. The coldness melted into something I couldn't understand. Shock, maybe? Confusion? He stopped 3 feet away and whispered, "Little bird?" Then louder, "Mamma mia, Claire Donovan?" I was too terrified to speak. How did this killer know my name? He kept staring at me, and then he said, 27 years ago, the quarry, you pulled a boy from the water." My mind went blank. Then suddenly I was 5 years old again, playing near that abandoned quarry outside our old neighborhood. I'd heard splashing and found a boy, maybe 8 years old, drowning in the murky water. I screamed for help, and some adults nearby pulled him out. While we waited for the ambulance, I gave him my little bird-shaped keychain because he was crying and scared. I told him the bird would protect him. My family moved away the next week, and I never thought about it again. This man, this killer,
reached into his pocket and pulled out that same keychain, faded, worn, but unmistakable. "You saved my life when you were just a child," he said. "I'm Vittorio Russo, and I never forgot." His men appeared behind him, asking in Italian if they should handle the witness. Vittorio turned and said something sharp that made them back off immediately. Then he looked at me and said, "This woman saved my life. We protect her, always." I didn't know what to do. I was holding Sophie, standing in an alley with a dead body 20 feet away, facing a murderer who apparently owed me a life debt. Vittorio gestured to the SUV and said we weren't safe here, that he'd take us somewhere secure. Every instinct told me to run, but where would I run to? My car with $47? Another cold night with Sophie asking why we couldn't have a real bed? So I got in the car. God help me. I got in the car with a Mafia boss because my daughter needed to be warm and safe more than I needed to be morally pure. He took me to a luxury apartment in a high-rise I couldn't afford in 10 lifetimes. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a refrigerator stocked with actual food. Sophie ran to the bedroom and literally cried when she saw the big bed with soft pillows. Vittorio stood in the doorway and told me I saw nothing that night, I said nothing, and in return, he'd keep us protected. He offered money, new identities, a fresh start. I wanted to be righteous and refuse, but I watched Sophie sleep in a real bed for the first time in months, and I agreed. Temporarily, I told myself, just until I figured things out.
Days turned into weeks. Vittorio visited every morning, bringing groceries, clothes that actually fit Sophie, toys that made her laugh. He'd sit and play chess with her, teaching her strategy with this surprising gentleness. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to demand something horrible in return, but he never did. He ran what he called import-export businesses, which obviously meant organized crime, but he never brought that darkness into our space. One morning, he offered me a job managing his restaurant, a legitimate Italian place in downtown Chicago. I laughed bitterly and said I wasn't laundering his money. He looked almost offended and said the restaurant was completely clean, that he needed someone he could actually trust, which was rare in his world. The pay was real, the work was legal, and I desperately needed genuine income to rebuild our lives. So I said yes. For the first time in years, I felt almost human again. Sophie started smiling more, I was working, earning money, sleeping in a real bed. Vittorio was still a criminal, still a killer, but to us, he was the only person who'd shown us mercy when we had nothing. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. The voice on the other end froze my blood. "Claire, it's Derek. We need to talk." But it wasn't just Derek. He introduced himself as FBI Special Agent Derek Morrison. Our entire marriage had been a cover while he investigated pharmaceutical fraud. Everything, the romance, the wedding, the 3 years together, all of it was a lie. He said he got pulled out when his cover was compromised, which was why he disappeared so suddenly. His voice was different now, official and cold. Then he said, "I know you're with Vittorio Russo. We need you to come in." I felt like I was drowning. My ex-husband was FBI? Our whole relationship was fake? He kept talking, saying he needed me to cooperate, to wear a wire and gather evidence against Vittorio. I asked about the abuse, the bruises, the terror. He had the audacity to call it method acting that went too far, like breaking my ribs was just him getting a little too into character. Then came the threat. "Cooperate, or I'll make sure you never see Sophie again. You're harboring a known criminal, Claire. That makes you an accomplice." I had 48 hours to decide. Betray the man who'd saved us, or lose my daughter forever. Derek gave me the wire and instructions for a meeting. I spent 2 days barely sleeping, playing every scenario in my head. I even tried to run, packed our stuff, and got to the bus station. But Vittorio's men found us before we could board. They weren't rough, but they brought us back to Vittorio. I expected anger, maybe violence. Instead, Vittorio just looked sad. "You don't trust me yet," he said quietly. "I understand. In your position, I wouldn't either.
Something in his voice broke me. I started crying and told him everything about Derek, the FBI, the wire, the threats about Sophie. I laid it all out and waited for him to have me killed. His advisors started arguing in rapid Italian, clearly wanting me eliminated. Vittorio silenced them with one word and turned to me. You came to me with the truth. In my world, that means something. Then he told me something that made my blood run cold. He'd known about Derek for months, been investigating my ex-husband independently, and what he'd found was so much worse than I imagined. Vittorio showed me surveillance footage and documents. Derek hadn't just abused me accidentally while playing a role. He'd deliberately brutalized me to make me vulnerable, broken, easier to manipulate later. Our meeting had never been random. He'd planned to use me as an asset against Vittorio from the very beginning. And that man who died in the alley, the one Vittorio executed, that was Derek's confidential informant who'd betrayed him. Derek himself had killed the informant, then framed Vittorio for the murder to justify FBI raids on his operations. I'd been a pawn in both their games, but at least Vittorio was being honest about it now. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "I'll help you disappear. New life, new name, complete protection for you and Sophie. But first, we end Derek's game, together." I should have said no. I should have taken Sophie and ran as far as we could. But Derek had beaten me, lied to me, used me, and now threatened to take my daughter. So I looked at Vittorio and said, "Tell me what to do." The plan was simple. I'd meet Derek wearing the wire he gave me, but it would be recording for Vittorio's lawyers, not the FBI. I just needed to get Derek talking, get him to confess to everything. It was terrifying, but I was done being a victim. I met Derek at a coffee shop, wearing the wire, my heart pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it. Derek smiled at me like we were old friends, started talking about how we'd make this work, how I'd get immunity if I cooperated. I played along, acted scared and compliant, then I asked him directly, "Did you kill that man in the alley?" He paused, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. He thought he had me trapped, thought I had no choice but to help him. So he admitted it, said the informant got greedy, threatened to expose Derek's real identity unless he got paid more. Derek made it look like a mob hit and framed Vittorio perfectly. I asked about the abuse. He actually laughed and said breaking me down was necessary to make me dependent, to ensure I'd be desperate enough to work with criminals when he needed me to. Every word was recorded, every confession captured. Then I asked the question Vittorio told me to ask. Do you know why Derek picked me specifically? Out of all the women in Chicago, why marry me? His smile faded. He leaned in close and said, "Because of who your father was, Claire. Did you really think I didn't know? Did you think Russo didn't know? My father? I'd barely known him. He died when I was 6, right after we moved away from that quarry town." Derek kept talking, unable to explain how clever he'd been. My father was Giovanni Donovan, a rival crime boss who'd ordered the hit on Vittorio's family 30 years ago. The attack on young Vittorio at the quarry wasn't an accident. He'd been thrown in there to drown. My mother fled with me after my father was killed in retaliation, changed our names, hid us for decades. She died 5 years ago without ever telling me the truth. Derek found this connection and orchestrated everything. Using me to get to Vittorio was his masterpiece, forcing the daughter of his enemy's killer to become his informant. The poetic justice, he called it. I felt sick, but I kept my voice steady. Does Vittorio know who I really am? Derek laughed again. Of course he knows. Why do you think he's protecting you? Guilt, maybe? Sentiment? Doesn't matter. You're both finished now. That's when I showed him my phone, recording our entire conversation on video. His face went white. "What did you do?" I stood up and said, "I chose honesty over fear. You taught me that choice matters." Vittorio's lawyer walked into the coffee shop and handed Derek a folder. Inside were copies of everything, the recordings, the evidence, documentation of Derek's real murder. The lawyer calmly said, "Your superiors at the FBI received these files 10 minutes ago. I believe they're waiting for you at your office." Derek was arrested by his own agency that afternoon. Murder, evidence tampering, falsifying federal reports, domestic violence. The case made national news. Decorated FBI agent exposed as corrupt killer. I should have felt victorious, but I just felt exhausted. Vittorio and I had one final conversation. He confirmed everything Derek said about my father, about the old war between their families. He said, "When I recognized you in that alley, I had a choice. Kill the daughter of my enemy or honor the child who saved me not knowing who I was or what I'd become. You chose to save me twice, Claire, once as an innocent child and once as a woman who chose honesty even when it could have gotten you killed." I asked him what he wanted from me now. He said nothing, just offered the help he'd promised. New identities, relocation money, a chance to start over out of all this darkness. I could walk away and never see him again, or I could stay connected to this world that was apparently in my blood. I chose a middle path. I took his help to relocate, but I stayed in touch. Not part of his world, but not enemies either. 6 months later, I run a small bakery in Portland under a new name. Sophie is thriving in 2nd grade, making friends, laughing like a normal kid. She doesn't remember much about those weeks in Chicago, just that a nice man helped us when we needed it. Every year on her birthday, flowers arrive with a card that says, "For the little bird who taught a monster about mercy." I never respond, but I keep the cards. I learned something through all of this. Karma doesn't always look like justice. Sometimes it looks like a killer who remembers the child you used to be. Sometimes it looks like choosing the devil you can trust over the angel who lies. Derek thought he was the hunter, orchestrating everything from the shadows. Vittorio thought he was the protector, repaying an old debt. But me, I was the one who decided how this story ended. I'm not proud of everything I did. I helped a criminal, worked in his business, aligned myself with violence to escape violence. But I'm alive, Sophie is safe, and the man who tried to destroy us both is in federal prison for the rest of his life. Maybe that's not the moral ending you wanted, but it's the true one. And truth, I've learned, is worth more than all the pretty lies in the world. So if this story shocked you, hit that subscribe button. I find the most twisted true tales where karma strikes in ways nobody sees coming. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have trusted Vittorio or would you have run? Team Mafia boss or team run and hide? Let's debate in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the person who saves you isn't the hero you expected. Sometimes